Huh?
Anyway, I've just put the record on because
it's lovely.
Tony's going to kick things off.
Welcome to, so I'm going to put my serious face on now. Welcome to everyone to Coffee Buddies, the last one of the week. My goodness, it's been a journey. We've done ups and downs, ins and outs. We've done everything. And it's been a terrific week. And we look forward to seeing you at our live events and more digital ones, which we're going to be. Graham is plotting, well, I'm plotting with him to do some more of these independently of Biotech Gate, because we get so much positive vibes from them. So, and we've had a great week, and we want to finish it off in a great way by having Panteli come and talk to us, a good friend of ours. Panteli, maybe you could just introduce yourself to the audience, who you are, what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Graham, for the opportunity. As always, you know, good to be back. You know, I mean, also good to to see a number of familiar faces on the screen here as well, as part of the the sort of the Biotech Buddies ecosystem. So really appreciate that. So my name's Panteli Theocharous. So I'm the Global Vice President, Cell and Gene Therapy Business Strategy Lead for PPD. So my role is to continue to lead the enterprise as we continue to really garner experience in delivering on the promise of cell and gene therapy for patients. Just over a year ago, we were acquired by ThermoFisher Scientific. But we retain our autonomy as the clinical research group of the organization. My background very quickly started my career in the clinical academic setting, large academic teaching hospital in London, where I trained and specialized in bone marrow and stem cell transplantation, the very early days of immunotherapy as we know it today. Worked on small scale manufacturing, part of the facility and the service to patients. But also worked on the very first generation CAR T in acute leukemia, as well as a number of AAV gene therapy platform technologies in rare disease. With that experience, moved into biotech and big pharma with a focus on clinical R&D, medical affairs, and commercialization of highly complex therapies. And I think to Frederick's point earlier, I think market access, pricing, and reimbursement, an absolutely critical step in the process in getting therapies to patients, and one not to be underestimated in terms of focus and need. And I've now been with the organization for 7 years in a variety of leadership positions. I'm on a number of scientific advisory boards, and really look forward to the conversation today with my good friend Tony Sedgwick.
Excellent. So we've got a couple of slides, and maybe you could bring them up, my friend. I mean, and having known you for several years now, the center of your thinking is always the patient. So maybe we could get straight into the content. If you can bring the slides up, that's the next issue.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, bringing up the slides, Tony, if you can just confirm that you can see the first slide.
Yeah, we got it now. Here it's, and it says delivering on the promise of cell and gene therapy, a patient-centric approach. And I think we're all interested in what you mean by a patient-centric approach, Panteli.
Absolutely. So let me just go to the next slide here. And I'll put it in presentation mode as I sort of just switch from one slide to the other from a technical perspective. So
yeah, we've got one this one's
yeah.
up now.
Yeah, okay. So this one talks to mass treatment and how this really differs with regards to individualized cell and gene therapies for patients. I think it's important to differentiate in terms of, the sort of the trend and the evolution of how we think about small molecule, drug delivery to patients. So really this is production, mass distribution to patients at select sites in a very global landscape. If we take an example from cell and gene, so if we think about CAR T, for example, so this is a highly sophisticated autologous approach. You collect cells from the patient, they're manufactured as part of a very well-described process in terms of that manufacturing approach. and then the cells are returned and reinfused to the patient at the site. There's a lot of complexity in terms of the process, but also the operating model. And I think the operating model certainly needs to be well orchestrated and well navigated.
And
I think it's important.
if you were looking,
Yes.
Panteli, into the future of these multiple steps in CGT, where do you think the room is for reducing the complexity?
Absolutely. So look, I think there's a number of different touch points, and I'll share with you a slide that talks to what's happening at the level of the patient. But I think what we're going to need to do is really focus on much more innovation and optimization of that manufacturing process. I think there's a lot of great technological know-how out there in terms of biotechs with really great ideas that are developing scientific platform. And we can certainly help and support them around optimization of a process. How do we reduce and compress timelines? How do we make this less cumbersome? Typically for a CAR-T, we're talking about anything from 4 to 11 weeks in terms of manufacturing the cells. I mean, we want to reduce that ideally to several days. So we need to really focus on that technological know-how, innovation and optimization. And I think that's going to then impact the way we think about cost of goods and ultimately the pricing of these highly complex but transformational therapies. This may also play out with regards to potentially moving forward from autologous to allogeneic approaches. So allogeneic is an off-the-shelf approach, which still harbors challenges and complexities from a clinical perspective. But I think there may be pros and cons around how we engineer and procure these cells.
I mean, if we talked about the Hitchhiker's Guide for the Galaxy. I mean, is it possible one day, do you think, that you're going to be arriving in the doctor's office and almost the manipulation of the cells can be done so sweetly that you can almost go straight into a transplant back? And do you think that eventually it's going to get very, very slick?
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. I think that's a great, it's a great question, and maybe I could just kind of fast forward to maybe this particular slide here to add a little bit of context to to your point. So so this is really the patient journey. We've got the patient at the epicenter, and what I've done here is really define the steps in the process around a very complex treatment algorithm. So, I think the slide illustrates the fact that we can navigate the patient journey. We can build in areas of efficiency, compressing timelines, being very practical. But, I think you're right. I hear, from sponsors about moving towards point of care. And I speak with sponsors who are developing highly innovative technologies where the patient is really the bioreactor. Where you infuse cells and you're expecting an immunological process to occur in order to elicit an anti-tumor effect, biologically speaking, in a patient with a solid tumor or a hematological malignancy. So we're becoming much more sophisticated. I think the other piece for me is, using viral vectors, for example. And we need to continue to learn. Certainly when I was in the world of transplant, we were conducting some really sophisticated graft engineering. How do we use these cells? How do we harness the power of the immune response? How do we get that patient equilibrium right in terms of preconditioning and preparing the patient? But we also need to reduce the anxiety around the patient with such a prolonged period of time in order to manufacture the cells of interest. So I think it's a great question, and hopefully that adds a little bit of context.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us more about the opportunity for streamlining, really, Panteli. You know,
Yeah,
from your perspective, on a daily basis, you're looking at this.
yeah, absolutely. You know, let me quickly go back to, you know, to this particular slide that talks to patient challenges, because I think, you know, as you mentioned there, Tony, we need to kind of really get into the, you know, put ourselves in the shoes of the patient and the treating physician and take that journey. And we validated a lot of that patient pathway and patient mapping through engagement with external stakeholders within the ecosystem, but also, I think, our engagement with patient advocacy groups. And I've spent a lot of time talking with biotech companies with really innovative technologies and platforms, as well as biopharma organizations that are acquiring companies, that are acquiring technology, they're merging, they're focusing on cell and gene as a continued area of strategic focus and growth. And these are some of the areas that are keeping sponsors up at night. These are pain points. And I think as an organization, we need to really serve the patient, and, you know, really engage in a way that allows us to have that attention to detail. So we've got solutions and capabilities that address all of these challenges, from recruiting patients, for example, moving from, I would say, monogenic to polygenic or chronic conditions where cell and gene therapies are now being developed outside of hematology, oncology, and neuroscience. We're seeing this in cardiology, in ophthalmology, you know, in some general medicine indications. So I think recruiting patients is important, and that kind of ties in again with the ecosystem around coordination and logistics, attention to detail, complex care needs, and adverse events. We need to really become much more sophisticated, and we're seeing the technology really address and move at speed, because these are live, biological, highly complex therapies that, again, can be highly transformational and life-changing. And we've seen that with some of the therapies being approved to date.
I have an interesting case study that maybe can
just should we just, if we just wait, I think Panteli's got one more slide, and then we'll open it up for we'll take your question, Frederick, after that one slide. Is it just this is your last one, isn't it, Panteli? Yeah.
Yes.
Just hold the question a sec, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, again, going back to your question there, Tony, around, you know, what are we seeing, what are we experiencing, you know, what is this, you know, what do these interactions actually imply, what do they mean? And this is by no means a, you know, selling exercise. This is about how can we be credible and trusted partners in delivering for patients, but also understanding the sponsor's needs. And I think as we navigate the patient journey, we're very kind of clear about the customer journey, the steps in the process. I think we have the ability to engage really early, to think about discovery and research, to be part of that thought process, and to be very methodical. And then I think, you know, we look at the continuum. And ThermoFisher Scientific is a great organization with a real focus on innovation and optimization, but very practical. And this is by no means exhaustive, but it's for illustrative purposes around building in the necessary elements at the right time of asset development, and where PPD or the clinical research group sits within that paradigm, supported by really important constructs and business units, manufacturing and clinical development. So I think this is a highly differentiated model, which is end-to-end, but I think it's all about being methodical and developing strategies that are highly specific and bespoke to the needs of the sponsor at the right time in the process. And I think, again, this is predicated on, you know, the number of years that I've certainly been involved in this space, but also the number of years that PPD has been in this space, over 10 years, but over the last 5 years, you know, really been able to manage more than 130 clinical trials across the cell and gene therapy ecosystem, which I think is very credible experience. And we need to continue to learn, we need to continue to add value. But as I've mentioned before, really ensuring that we have the patient at the epicenter of the framework that we're building.
Fantastic, my friend. Well, thank you very much. We take the slides off. Graham, maybe you can stop the recording, and then I'm going to